Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Neil Allen. I'm the Head of Legal Services for Woking Borough Council. I'm a barrister by profession. I'll hand over to Sanjay.
Hello, everyone. My name's Sanjay Prasher. I'm the Borough Solicitor and Monitoring Officer at Bracknell Forest Council. From me, over to Sarah.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Clark. I'm Service Director for Strategy and Governance, which includes legal services, and I'm also the Monitoring Officer at West Berkshire Council. For those of us, or for those of you joining who don't know what the Monitoring Officer is, that is a statutory role under the Local Government Act 1989, and it places a statutory duty on us individually and personally to ensure that the local authority acts in a lawful manner and doesn't kind of commit to any form of maladministration. So just to clarify that, and from there I will hand over to Elaine.
Hi, I'm Elaine Brown. I am the Deputy Director of Law and Governance and Monitoring Officer at the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, and I'm a solicitor by trade. And I'll hand over to Michael.
Hi everyone, I'm Mike Graham. I'm the Assistant Director for Legal and Democratic Services at Reading Borough Council. I'm a solicitor. I've been in local government since I was a trainee. I'm also the Monitoring Officer of the Council. I'm also the Council's Returning Officer, which means obviously I'm responsible for elections when they come round.
Brilliant. Thanks, Michael.
I think that's all of us. Yeah.
Amanda, shall I go on and just do a little bit more? Just tell everyone out there why we're here, what we're trying to cover during the course of today. Just say hello to everyone. And it's simply the fact that as local government, we've always recruited from a diverse background, diverse in a lot of different ways, because people don't just very rarely sort of join local government and stay in local government. They come in from lots of other backgrounds, lots of other legal backgrounds, lots of social cultural backgrounds as well. So we want to use this as a new way of attracting a new audience of new recruits, because we always need new people coming to local government. As you're going to hear, there's a lot going on in local government. There always is, always will be, and we're really keen to find people who want to join us in doing that. So what I'll do, and so to start things off, Sanjay, do you want to, because it isn't always serious, is it, Sanjay? So just over to you, and do you want to sort of tell us a story?
Yeah, thank you very much, Neil. Yeah, I mean, it's not always serious in local government. We have fun along the way as well. So one funny story to begin with, and I'm sure I can throw this out to others as well. One of the funny stories early on in my career was in an employment tribunal where I was cross-examining a claimant in a dismissal claim, and I asked the question as part of the cross-examination, are you clumsy? This is something that had been referred to or referenced in a witness statement. So I posed this with the claimant. He took umbrage at it, jumped up, and threw a pitcher of water across the table. I was minded to say I rest my case at that point, but it was adjourned for lunch. So fortunately that ended it there. But again, that was one of the funniest stories in my experience, but I'm sure others have got some as well. I don't know if I throw it out to the floor, Sarah, Mike, Neil, and Elaine, anyone else?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, we had a good experience. I think it sort of illustrates the kind of work we do, and also the sort of the kind of situations which you can get yourself in. One of the things obviously we do in local government legal is supporting all our colleagues in the different services, and so people are sometimes surprised by the huge number of different businesses that we've actually got in local government. I think I counted it up once. It's like more than 30. There's like things like, you know, building control. Some authorities have got fire, there's like planning, there's like estates, there's all the support services like finance and ICT. You've got your frontline services like planning and housing and all that sort of stuff. So there's a huge amount of variety. We went out one day for lunch, and I'll sort of segue into which team we were supporting afterwards. We went out for lunch one day as a legal team to someone which was in our sort of neighbourhood locally, and it had a sort of a reasonable reputation. And we went there, really, really, really lousy meal, and everyone was saying this has really gone downhill. This is not nice. It's a bit grim, and yeah, it's a really bit grim. We came back to the office to discover that our colleagues in environmental health had also visited there, but in a professional capacity. university on food hygiene reasons, and they'd left us a prosecution file. The irony being, when we were out there for lunch, we came back to this prosecution file to prosecute this pub, and in it was all the grim pictures of the disgusting conditions in their fridges, in their storage, and we just said, "Oh my God, we've just eaten there," and as a few of us went a bit green round the gills. But there's odd things like that can happen from time to time. But there's a kind of your professional duty at that point is to separate the fact that you might need to go and be sick, but you've actually got to then give them proper advice about the success of that food hygiene prosecution, ignoring the fact that you've just been there and feel a bit aggrieved by the fact you've eaten their food.
Michael, have you ever been back?
No, well, this is another bit of local government, is that on the basis of that, we prosecuted them, okay? So we prosecuted them. They got a massive fine and costs. They had to close. On the back of the fact that they closed, a brand new food business came into that site, which was actually one of the best food businesses in the borough. It has thrived ever since. We go back all the time. So yeah, it's the new food business, and the new food business generated millions of pounds worth of revenue and provided hundreds of jobs for people for many years now, and it's a big success and a big tourist draw. And it's one of those things you think sometimes to yourself, I had a little bit of a part in that. And I think that's one of the joys about the local government work, is that you can drive around your own borough or the borough you're working and think, oh yeah, I had something to do with that. And that scheme over there, I had something to do with that, and you sort of get a warm feeling. But you're sort of making that direct link then between not only what's on your desk and the work that you're doing, or the legal work you're doing, whether it's a contract or an advice or something litigious, but you're then able to see what the outcomes are in the community and what's actually happened in real life, and so you do feel very connected then to the community you're supporting.
Yeah, so I think when I was reflecting on this, and actually that there's been anyone who's picked up on any of my posts on LinkedIn, that there've been lots of things, and actually as a kind of monitoring officer group, we've discussed some of our kind of the funny incidents, and we were talking about whether we need to have another version of the webinar that's after the watershed. So just in terms of some of the things that we couldn't share about kind of some of our licensing cases, and some of the headlines that I had appear in the local newspapers as a young kind of regulatory prosecutor, which I don't know that they would appear today. So actually I've kind of gone back to my roots of being a northerner, and I'm kind of pointing a bit of fun at ourselves here, which was we at one point we'd been instructed by our members. They decided that they wanted to challenge a government policy that would kind of have quite significant kind of financial implications for the council, and anyone who's been involved in any kind of judicial review proceedings, etc., will know that you're up against fairly tight deadlines, especially once you've kind of taken advice, etc. And then so you have to get your documents, kind of your pleadings, filed at court. And certainly back at this stage, I don't know whether it's changed now, you couldn't make payments kind of online. You had difficulties kind of submitting documents online to the High Court. So the safest thing is just somebody needs to go down to London and get them filed. So our one of my service managers at the time, he was kind of obviously well, as a litigator, I would say, as a procurement lawyer, he obviously had that kind of litigator envy, so he was kind of desperate to be the one to go down to London and file those pleadings. So off he went down to the train station, which is just beside the council offices. And about, I don't know, 20 minutes later, I got a call from him, and he's kind of, Sarah, I've got a real problem. I was like, what's happened? Have you missed the train? And he was like, no. He said, I forgot, I'm meant to be picking the kids up from school. Can you go and get them? And these were quite young children who, like, having children myself, I kind of did think that there might be a sort of challenge with stranger danger. And I was planning how I'd get my own children who went to the same primary school to come and kind of maybe soften that stranger danger risk. Anyway, in the end, his wife managed to get back and collect the children. So that was one of the stories that we could share, I think, in terms of funny stories.
Good teamwork.
Always good teamwork,
I think
actually.
the interesting. I think there's always good teamwork in local government. I think there's the other thing is when you're talking about bigger cases, it's the unusualness of some of these cases that we deal with sometimes, and the fact that there's that variety. So yeah, we do things like routine food hygiene prosecutions, but I mean, one day I got the leader walked into the office, and they decided then to take very seriously their opposition to a big project, a big infrastructure project in the borough, and they actually wanted me to judicially review the Environment Agency because they were proposing to permit this big facility, and I said, okay, on what basis? On the basis that they've already consulted us and we haven't responded, on what basis will we possibly do this? And he said, I don't know, you're the lawyer, find a way, find a way. And I locked myself in a room for 2 weeks, trying to go through the finer points of EU waste disposal regulations and everything about it, which I had absolutely nothing about. And we came up with about 12 points we thought were particularly weak about this permitting scheme. Went off to see my learned friend, who thought about 3 of them were worth a go. And so we put 3 of them in a pre-action protocol letter to the EA, and they couldn't answer one of them. And so we thought, oh great, we've got them. So the developer then and the EA, well, the developer particularly, then who was joined into the proceedings, had to give an undertaking. They weren't going to build this infrastructure as it was currently set out. They had to go around the loop again and get it all back through the planning permission and get it re-permitted, which eventually happened. But the council felt that they'd made their voice really known about that. They were not. They looked really aligned to their community because the community was up in arms about this particular development, and so it was a little bit of a Pyrrhic victory. But it was a good opportunity in terms of local democracy, for us to be able to say, no, this is what the council is democratically for. This is something which everyone feels very strongly about. We're going to put our case forward. And even though eventually this thing got built in the community, we've certainly made a good case for ourselves and represented the people well. So there's all sorts of different kinds of litigation that we might get involved in, all sorts of different kind of transactions too.
That links in with the place shaping role of council, doesn't it? Which as lawyers we get involved in. People do understand that we provide services as councils, and legal provide advice and assistance to different departments, but the council's wider agenda is actually developing the place, whether it's regeneration or crime and disorder and relationships with other providers. So that's a very good example.
Shows how rewarding working in local government can be. I'm sure we can all think of some stories of how rewarding it can be.
Yeah. Well,
yes.
I think really sort of, I suppose that one of the great kind of benefits of working in a local authority is the breadth of the kind of businesses as usual work that we do. So actually, I mean, I kind of touched on my background as a regulatory prosecutor, and so I would routinely be at courts, and that would be with everything actually from kind of noise nuisance, food hygiene, and actually I've eaten in my own share of restaurants which were subsequently closed down due to cockroaches, rats, etc. And rogue traders, and actually some of those sort of rogue trader cases have really significant impacts on the victims, and so actually you get that real sense of reward when actually you secure a conviction, and actually also when you secure compensation for those victims. So actually it is really kind of rewarding, and I suppose actually what we also get to do is to interact with our schools. So actually, I mean, we advise schools and sort of provide legal advice and support, but we also go into schools to support them. So whether that's through kind of doing mock interviews with schools, going in to talk to school children about kind of what we do in local government, and what I find is that actually I'm always the one who kind of gains the most out of those events, because the enthusiasm of the young people is just infectious. And I think the other thing just to kind of reflect upon is kind of the breadth of work in terms of our kind of emergency planning. and our responsibilities around civil contingency. So actually, in West Berkshire, we've got 2 AWE facilities. So that's the Atomic Weapons Establishment. So actually, the legislation that we deal with might was touching on some there. You really do go into kind of sort of legislation that people wouldn't frequently go to. I was involved recently in an all-decks exercise, so that was testing the emergency plan for AWE, and that was kind of quite significant actually in terms of what would happen, and actually the role of the local authority in that, and the role of lawyers from local authorities in supporting that. How do we use the legislation to ensure the safety of our community? So I think it's really kind of broad, and yeah, I think we've got some probably more specific examples. I don't know if anyone else has got kind of some more tailored or kind of
Well, I think so. But I'll just chip in there because actually, like you, I grew up in inverted commas as a regulatory prosecutor. But one thing I find about local government, and I say this down the years to lots of people, lots of trainees that we've had, it's like being in a sweet shop from a lawyer's point of view.
Yeah.
Because you've got all these different topics, and the other thing about local government is you've got a lot of control as to which topic you can go into, because either it's you might want to go into it, or your organization needs you to sort of develop into it. So, for example, when I joined Wokingham about 16 years ago, I had no licensing experience. They needed someone to do licensing. I now consider myself quite an expert in licensing, sit on the committees. I've advocated in magistrates and crown courts on appeals and stuff like that. So, and that's not just me. A colleague of mine came in from a criminal defense background, is now a housing lawyer. And there's lots of examples where people do get that chance to stretch out. So that causes its own pressures, of course. So I think that's one of the key things. In terms of a specific thing, I got a real interest in health and safety law. I was previously at Brent Council. Before that, I've been at Lewisham. So I've worked in London as well as out in Berkshire as well. And it gave me a chance to look at some quite major health and safety cases. And I was doing those from the very start of the reviewing lawyer to being the prosecuting advocate in the Crown Court, and followed that through. So, for example, at Wokingham, we've had different cases, and I found myself against what were Queen's Council, now King's Council, actually advocating in court. And I don't think there's many organisations that would give you that opportunity to do law right from cradle to grave, as it were.
Yeah. I think that's a good segue, Neil, also into the, in terms of our audience, the broad spectrum of work that we do in local government. Without listing everything, you've got all the sort of people-related activities, whether it's employment, adult social care, education. You mentioned licensing as well. We do information governance law, and then there's the standard property contracts, planning law. So the diversity of work is a real attraction, and I'm sure we'll come on to talk more about that in a moment as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is really broad. In Windsor and Maidenhead, we deal with lots of large civic events. So I was very proud to support some of these, such as various royal weddings, the sad death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, her funeral, the death of Prince Philip. Actually, that was particularly challenging. It was during COVID. And I had to work with DCMS to make amendments to the COVID restriction regulations, because obviously they had people visiting from other parts of, outside of Europe, outside of the UK. So the restriction amendments had to be, the restriction regulations had to be amended. So, you wouldn't think you'd be doing something so legalistic for a civic event such as a royal funeral. It's just such a broad range of every day is different, and you get some really interesting things landing on your desk, and it's just really nice to know that you make a real difference. And without the lawyers, these things don't happen. We might just be a small cog in the wheel, but we are an important cog of the wheel, and it's just nice to see, even as a contracts lawyer, any developments that have taken place, buildings that have been built for the good of the community, you know that you've had a part of that, and I just think it's really rewarding, and it's something you can be really proud of. And I just think it just makes our job just that more interesting, knowing that you're making such a difference. You know, obviously
there is that connection, isn't there? I think so.
But it's not without its challenges, and I'm sure we can all relate to where we've faced challenges. I don't know if anyone wants to talk about challenges faced working as lawyers in local government.
Yeah, I think, I suppose, just reflecting on your kind of the having to change the legislation to allow the funeral of Prince Philip to go ahead. I've often reflected on the role of local government in the COVID response, which really kind of highlighted the power of local government. I think communities themselves kind of rose to that challenge. But I've got a really kind of broad range of teams now that I am responsible for. And if somebody had asked me kind of before the pandemic started, you know, which of those teams will be called to action first, it was that kind of whole emergency planning. I've got the comms team, for example, I've got the digital team. So I would have had the lawyers, I think, fairly low down the list. And actually, I couldn't have been further kind of, I was very mistaken in terms of the role that the legal team were going to play, because actually that the sort of amount of legislation that was issued and the pace at which legislation was issued was really kind of quite significant. So actually I had lawyers, and actually themselves with kind of young families, and everyone was kind of at home. We were all kind of struggling to make that move to remote working because we weren't set up to work in this way at the start of COVID. And actually they were having to advise and sort of working quite often late into the night, because guidance would sometimes change literally within 24 hours. We would be given guidance about kind of care homes procedures and sort of vulnerable adults, etc., and it would change. So it was, they had to be really kind of dynamic in that response and available, and they really kind of, I suppose, rose to that challenge. And I think quite often our colleagues across the public sector were kind of some of the unsung heroes during COVID, and I think that's something worth reflecting upon. Certainly I was kind of promoting the kind of local government heroes during that kind of challenging period. So I think that's for me certainly kind of one of my reflections.
Yeah,
I think that's the difference,
definitely agree about COVID. Sorry, Mike. Sorry, you carry on.
No. I was agreeing with Sarah, but I think there's, from what you've both said, I think it's I think there's definitely things which are points of difference to your sort of local government legal career to private practice. Obviously, private practice has got its own rewards, and they'll have things that they want to shout about, or in-house in commerce, for instance. But I think the things which we can draw out from this conversation, there's a lot of stuff around regeneration and placemaking, and making the place where you live a different and better place, which is fantastic. There's always something about events. We always get pulled into events if things are happening in the borough, and it's like sort of all hands on deck. So you've talked about all the great stuff that you've done in Windsor and Maidenhead because of the unique place that you've got in Windsor. There were the connections with the royal family, but I mean, I've got it drawn into other much lower key events, but it's giving you a great sense of satisfaction to be able to lead those and deliver something which is worthwhile in your own community. And the other one is putting my returning officer hat on. Lawyers always get involved in elections. We're always mucking in with elections, and that is such a big event. And it's a really good sort of team spirit when everybody comes together, and you have again safely delivered another election. There's that kind of overriding theme that throughout what we're doing in our work, whether it's transactional work, regulatory work, there's something about us making other people's lives safer and better with our professional colleagues, because that's the other thing, I suppose, about working in local government is we've got our professional colleagues to work with every day. They're on the front line. We don't often see the end customers. If you're supporting social workers, they're the ones who you meet the kids who are in danger or possibly being neglected, etc. We don't meet them, but we're supporting them to help them resolve that situation. So you know that that's happening, and you know that you've got a kind of a reason in the work and a purpose. And we put, it's one of the things that we put on our little advert, wasn't practice with purpose. I think that sense of purpose is there throughout an awful lot of what we do day in, day out business as usual, and also some of the bigger events, one-off events.
You touched upon working with other professionals, and that's one of the joys of local government law, isn't it? You develop relationships in a way that perhaps you wouldn't in private practice. You develop relationships with planning officers, social workers, licensing officers, and I think that's one of the good attractions in terms of relationship building as well, which makes it such a joy to work in local government.
Yeah, Sanjay, sorry, just on the back of that, picking up what Mike said about elections, one thing I really enjoyed, I was elections inspector during general election in Brent in London, and one of the nice things about that was driving around to the different polling booths, and you meet colleagues, but in a very, from all the different departments, but together, people you wouldn't normally see together, and just that nice feel of all being generally one team, as it were, to deliver something. So sorry, Sarah, I cut you off.
No. I think well, so I suppose I'm just kind of on the elections point. I was also a polling station inspector, and so that and yeah, I started off with smaller heels on that day, and by the end of the day, I was definitely in my trainers. I'm also deputy returning officer, but yeah, I think that's the kind of challenges of local government. And sorry, I think the opportunities when you talk about working with colleagues, that there is also, I think, something that's possibly unique to the sector in terms of working with our kind of the third sector, and actually sort of working with the police, working with the health service, and actually there are kind of so many codependencies between those different bodies that actually it is really interesting. And actually, I mean, one sort of an example of working with the police really well, we managed to secure an injunction, which and I am kind of out of most of the frontline legal work these days. So my colleagues had worked very hard to secure an injunction. It was in relation to an unauthorised development, and they had been trying to persuade the High Court to hear this on a particular afternoon. And the court staff were adamant that the judge was kind of going to be sitting late, and they had a full kind of caseload the following morning that they needed to prepare for. So they were saying there's no chance that you're going to get this tonight. The judge at some point obviously saw some of this traffic and said, actually, I am going to hear this tonight. This is clearly kind of quite significant. So the judge was persuaded to sit and was persuaded to grant this injunction. And unfortunately, after we'd kind of got this injunction at about 9 o'clock at night, our enforcement officers decided that they wouldn't be available to serve this injunction. So because I'm a lawyer and therefore uniquely qualified to do anything, of course, I sort of said, well, okay, we've persuaded the judge that it's this important. Clearly, I now need to go and serve this injunction. And actually, I have to say the police were brilliant. So I literally called the police at about 9 o'clock. They're in the middle of a shift change, but actually they did arrange to come out, and I persuaded one of my colleagues who goes back a very long time to some of those cockroaches and rat cases. They're now in a different role as well within the authority, but I persuaded her to come out with me. And actually we had a kind of police car convoy. There were 3 police cars, and that was actually to secure the road. So kind of learning from kind of some challenging incidents that we've also had in the district. So anyway, we had that was certainly one of my most exciting kind of experiences as a local government lawyer, was going out in the dark, and it was left to me to go out and hang this injunction on a gate in complete darkness at about 11 o'clock on a summer evening. So
there we are.
yeah,
They're getting good value there. Getting good value for the lawyers.
So yeah. So I don't know. Have we we've talked
We were
about
talking,
the
I
biggest
think
challenges.
Elaine mentioned challenges. Yeah, that was the point I think we needed to come on to. I think with challenges, I mean, it's also part of the feature of the job, is quite enjoyable part of the job, is the political nature. Because you're working in a political environment, and the council's direction is it's a democratic institution, and you elect councillors, and then they're making decisions about the way the resources are spent. So you're very much taking the lead from the councillors. Some of the chat that can be interesting, and working with them is exciting, because they're often in different councils. They're completely different makeups and different groups of people. I think one of the challenges is when they change quite quickly. We've seen that recently across Berkshire, and I've had some of this in my last local authority area. As you're working with administration, they tell you the priorities are A, B, and C, and you're going hell for leather to deliver priorities A, B, and C. And then a new administration comes in and go, we don't want any of that. You think, well, hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. We've been delivering all this, or setting this all up for delivery now. You can't just extricate yourself like a sort of a click of the fingers. There's a bit more to it than that, and you can find that there's a lot of tension that sometimes comes into that dialogue about how you're going to swiftly change course. And you do find yourself being a bit of a diplomat as well as being a lawyer, because you've got to be able to sort of work with people across the political spectrum, and I think it gives you a whole different set of skills. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm the #1 diplomat. People who know me or who might be watching this call will go, "You diplomat? You'd be kidding." But I think I can see the rest of you are probably more diplomatic than me.
I think that kind of political element is a massive part of our job, and actually it's definitely. I mean, I kind of did studied politics, and then kind of. I think it is a really interesting dynamic, and I suppose as monitoring officers, actually, we also kind of have those responsibilities around standards, but actually, sort of that kind of the change of kind of sort of the political leadership. We'd had a sort of administration for about 18 years of one colour, and we've had kind of quite a significant change of that kind of leadership at the last elections, and actually one of the and it does take some diplomacy, and because as a lawyer, I think you're sometimes perceived as being a blocker, and I think it's just for new, and we've got a lot of newly elected members, and actually explaining some of the kind of infrastructure kind of and the regulatory requirements around decision making in local government can be kind of mind-blowing, I think, because and it's not as a lawyer I'm being kind of difficult. This is the legislative framework, and the local government encyclopedia. I do still have a paper copy. I'm sorry for everyone who's kind of become kind of more 20th century.
We'll forgive you.
But there's kind of 7 volumes of the local government encyclopedia, and I do still use it an awful lot, and I think that's really important. But I think we had our new administration, and they were so keen to hit, and it's brilliant. There is so much enthusiasm, and that's brilliant, the passion, and they care about the district. But actually, when they say, right, we want this to happen now, we are now the kind of ruling party, and actually it's right, okay, so we've got a forward plan, so it needs to go on the forward plan for 28 days, and actually before it can go on before you kind of make that decision, you're going to have to do the business case, and you're going to have to kind of draft a report, and so there is a whole governance kind of structure. And actually what I would say as a monitoring officer, the importance of good governance and our role and in fact all lawyers in the public sector have a really critical role to play in maintaining that kind of governance and the good governance, and that there are examples, unfortunately, at the moment kind of across the country where those governance failings, where people haven't asked the questions or stopped the kind of what seem to be good ideas, and the local authorities are literally paying for that now. So I think that it's a challenge, but actually when you get it right and you get those decisions made, actually it's also really rewarding.
I think lawyers have to be the ones who speak truth to power, and you're right, there's been a number of governance failures where perhaps lawyers or monitoring officers, chief financial officers haven't actually sort of come up to proof, as it were. But going back to the challenge point, Sarah, it is something that I always say to my lawyers. We have to be facilitative at the same time. We're working in a political environment, as you said, new members come in, they want X, Y, and Z done. So it's a real balance between being the sort of safeguarding element, if you like, of the public purse in terms of legality, whilst at the same time being facilitative. I've got this little sticker up on my screen that I always have. It says the monitoring officer is a watchdog and not a ferret. And basically, and I can't remember where I got it from, but essentially it's about getting that balance right between making sure that we do our role as gatekeepers properly, but at the same time being seen as part of the project team, if you like. And as you said, when we get it wrong, then there can be consequences, and that's happened in one or two other authorities. But generally, it is a very exciting role, because you can be part of the decision-making process in the sense of, feeling part of a larger project. And when you see the benefits that accrue, the outcomes you see, in regeneration terms, for example, that can be really satisfying for lawyers.
I can see Amanda's put a hand up, so we're about to be regulated
Oh.
ourselves.
I feel like we could talk for hours, because there are so many interesting stories, so many things to share. And when this group first started to get together to discuss how we would put across the type of information so people understood what it looked like to work in local government in this area, there is so much content and so many interesting stories. I think we need to just take a moment to work out what you need to have as a qualification to get into this work. So Michael, could you talk that through, please?
Well, I mean, it's no different to any other sector in terms of your legal qualifications, but I think the advantage of working with the local authorities, it's so flexible. It's open to lots of different routes of entry. We've got a big apprenticeship program. We are, of course, encouraged by the nature of our organisations to be thinking about training and development and providing economic opportunities for our population. So, yeah, we do work with our local schools. We also work in Reading with the university to try and encourage their students to come up to the council as interns. We've got a big training programme, so we're training people across all different parts of the profession. Neil's mentioned that he's a barrister. We've just got accreditation ourselves to take some pupil barristers into Reading, but we've got a big trainee solicitors program, and we also have a really good representation of people who are legal executives through SILEX registration as well. We've got our career grades really clearly set out about how we will encourage that kind of entry points to the profession and encourage people to start off at whatever point and to take them through. So we've got lots of great examples of people on training contracts now with the SQE, the new route, which is coming through. We're also working on relation to the new SILEX qualification routes as well. And I mentioned already the fact that we're going to be taking the bar trainees as well, the pupils. So that's another great example. So we're very open to ensuring that we're training our next generation of lawyers to make sure that we've got people for the future.
Yeah, I think I'd just say, I mean, I joined West Berkshire Council in the last century as a trainee solicitor. So I came here on a 2-year kind of fixed term contract, and obviously I am still here. But I think one of the unique sort of selling skills, throughout my career, I've been really supported to kind of develop, to kind of expand and really thrive as a lawyer in my kind of career. But I think also kind of that there is also that kind of sector support. So actually, we are kind of monitoring officers, solicitors from across Berkshire. We're from different authorities, and yet actually so we meet on a monthly basis, and kind of so we have really good peer support there, and sometimes you just need to have a safe space to kind of get things off your chest, as it were, and so actually we've got that through the monitoring officer group, and actually there is also the local government association who provide that kind of even higher level of kind of peer support, which is it's a real kind of sector specific kind of benefit that I think we have, and kind of that helps us to thrive.
So if anyone, I can see that there was a question that's been answered. So thank you for answering that. If anyone does have any more questions, though, you are very welcome to message us outside of this webinar. So please do, or connect on LinkedIn, where you would have discovered the link originally. So please do that. We've only got 2 minutes left, and then I will need to conclude our session for today, but I hope everybody has enjoyed it. Just finally, I wanted to touch around the group to ask everyone, what is the best part of working in this way? So Michael, we'll start with you.
Well, I'll be quick then. I'll say, if you've only got 2 minutes, I'll say partnership. I mean, the fact that we are working here together because there's no competition between us, and we're all working for a bigger objective is I think a unique feature of local government. So I'll say partnership.
Okay, Sanjay?
I think one of the great joys for me has been developing staff and seeing staff progress through the routes. And once or twice we've had legal assistants who've struggled to get training contracts, and being able to offer training contracts and seeing those individuals then thrive. So developing staff, and it might be that I'm a little misty-eyed at my point in my career where, you know, it's about developing staff. So yeah, I think that's been a real joy for me.
Thank you. Neil?
People I work with, people I work for, the community, the populations that we work for, even the people we sue and go against, because they can be really interesting as well. And also, like Sanjay mentioned, you know, trainees. I had a message yesterday from one of my former trainees from 10 years, which was a delight. I was really pleased to hear from him. He's now in private practice, trained with us. So, Aman, you're a star. All right, take care.
Oh, yes, we love Aman, yeah.
Elaine knows Aman. But one quick one, Amanda, are we going to get back to the question? There's a question there in the chat. We're going to get an answer to that.
Yeah, Michael, did you answer the question?
I didn't work out how to do that, so I can answer it online.
It says, do you need to have an LLB degree, or is another first-class degree acceptable, and the council can sponsor a PGDL?
Do you know, it's really difficult to give an answer to that, because we do so many different things that it wouldn't be unheard of for people to come in and do apprenticeships routes and to get funding to do that kind of course of study. So, you know, if you're interested, just apply and see if you can get, because there's lots of opportunities, there's lots of different jobs, and you never know what the particular fit is between you and the council that you want to work for, and the kind of work that they want to be done. So usually we do take people at sort of graduate level, and they come in with a law degree or the PG DC or whatever it's called these days. I'll just call it the old conversion course. But you know, I would never say never, because there's so many different examples around the place.
I'm going to put my email address in the answer for that attendee, and they can come to me, and I'll see whether I can gather enough information and get maybe a route for them at the very least.
No problem.
I'm going to come to Elaine next. Elaine, if you can tell us why you do this wonderful work. What are you most proud of?
I think obviously Neil's already mentioned, I think it has to be about the people, and the fact that, you know, as we've mentioned, all the politics of it all, you're actually on the front line. You're actually there as part of, it's really exciting. You're not just giving legal advice. If you're in private practice, you know, you may not be quite as involved in the frontline decision making, and I just think that's really exciting. And all of the different people that we speak to, all of the different people we have to deal with, you know, even as Neil said, even sometimes the people on the other side are quite interesting to work with. So I think it has to be the people, and just the opportunity to meet different people and see the difference that you can make to people's lives. I just think that it makes me love my job. You know, I wouldn't want to work anywhere else.
And Sarah?
Yeah, so it's really hard to go last, isn't it? Because everyone's kind of already spoken about some of the great things. But I suppose for me, the best things about working in local government, definitely the sort of the teams, the people. So I have an outstanding team of people that are in my department, but also colleagues across the council, our members, actually working for the communities. And I think if it was one word, it would be the challenge of the job. So because you know, as a kind of an individual, I love challenge, and actually every day comes with its own unique challenges, and I suppose that the higher those challenges when overcome, the higher the reward. So yeah, it's a brilliant kind of job to have, and I would definitely encourage people to join the sector.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you to all the panelists today. I hope everyone who's attended has enjoyed the session, and hopefully we will join you with another webinar soon. We do plan to have an in-person networking event, so we will share the information with you. If you're interested in anything that's been discussed today, you are very welcome to email us and get in touch. Thank you very much for that comment. That's lovely. Okay, have a lovely lunch, everybody, and it was lovely to have you with us today. Good afternoon.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.